If you vote in favor, the referral motion is postponed. So all of those in favor of postponing the referral motion and having some debate on this substance today. Those in favor. Mr. Reams, can you count? I mean, I know you can count. Okay.
I have 9 affirmative.
Okay, the negative, please. I'll read them out. Director Jensen, Isaac, Alto, Chief Sam, Chief Thomas, Director Bryce, Director Screech, Director Brownoff.
8
okay.
Against, so the motion carries.
Okay, so the motion to refer has been postponed. Someone could move to lift that from the table. We're now on to the substance of this motion for discussion. Director Desjardins, Director Derman, Director Young.
Chair, I may be asking the question out of order now, but what I want to do is to go to staff in terms of what are the implications of the discussion we just had in terms of delay. Maybe if I say any delay, what are the implications?
Through the chair, we've been working towards a timeline to bring back a project to 3P Canada by the end of March. We will be needing to communicate to the federal funders and to the province, I'm sure, sometime very shortly about where we're at with that project. So if we are going to refer back to staff and do some more work, that essentially would be the message until we had an opportunity to do that work. And then subject to any further debate and when that would be in late March or potentially into and beyond our extension, we would not be demonstrating progress. And so that, I think, committee has to weigh that message with our funders and when we would be communicating with funders in regards to how far we got in this 1-year period.
Okay. Thank you, Director Desjardins. You still have the floor. Good. Okay. Director,
thank you. That's good.
Thank you, Director Derman. On the motion on the table. Thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have 2 things. First of all, I would like to suggest an amendment in the wording. And if you go into section 2 of the recommendation, right at the end of the first paragraph, it says, compliance with provincial and federal requirements and demonstration of significant fiscal advantages over the base case. I would like to change that to significant fiscal advantages and or environmental advantages over the base case, including financial backing.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Plant. To add, you may not need to motivate, to add the words and or environmental benefit.
But the only thing is, under 2C, I would like to have the same wording because 2C repeats the wording. Sure.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. And or environmental benefit?
Advantages, sure.
Environmental, sure. May I call the question on that amendment? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other thing I just want to refer to is that this may ultimately get referred to staff, but if I read number 2, there are 2 things going on there. One, Director Isaac has requested information on specific sites that have been proposed at one time or another. The first paragraph clearly, it indicates that the CRD, I guess, staff would prepare this, would invite the submission of project concepts to achieve the goal of the charter. That's much broader than just McLaughlin, and it might end up being McLaughlin, but it's much broader than just McLaughlin or Clover Point or wherever. It really talks about project design, period. And so that could, if the project if this recommendation is referred, then number 2 could be delayed. That first part of number 2 could be delayed as well. There's no reason why they couldn't be happening in parallel.
Okay, thank you, Director Derman. And next I have Director Young.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I am in support of this motion in general, and partly it's because having been in your position, I have a lot of sympathy for the general view that we should be moving forward on this. I agree that there is a lot of disagreement around the table. At the same time, I think and I hope that we can get support for a motion that says, as this one I think says, we have decided that we need a central plant at some location within the core area, and that is technically feasible for liquid stream treatment, and that we agree that biosolids treatment should take place in some form, although we haven't decided exactly what technology we'll use, at a remote site, and that the sites we are provisionally putting forward for the central plant are McLaughlin, Clover Point, and Rock Bay, and that the site we're provisionally putting forward for the biosolids is Heartland. Now, I make it very clear that among those central sites, I have a preference. I make no bones about it. I think from every point of view, McLaughlin is the superior site, but I am aware that not everyone shares that point of view. I firmly believe that Clover Point will be found to be technically not feasible for reasons that were alluded to today, that it simply doesn't have space for a single plant, and that if we tried to divide the liquid train into two plants, it would be too expensive. But I'm prepared to leave it on the table because I think we have to be able to say to our funders, look, we are making some progress. And basically one area in which we may be throwing things a little more open for discussion is the technology that is to be used at Heartland for treatment of the biosolids. And I think that I know there's a lot of interest in the possibility of examining integrated treatments that combine municipal solid waste with biosolids. And I understand from my limited technical knowledge that there are some technical benefits to that, or could be, and that it may be an environmentally sound thing to do. And I think it should be, we should mention that that is something we may want to consider doing. But I believe that we can move forward in this general direction. And as I say, I do think there are a couple of things that should be that need to be clarified. I think we've used the terminology for the wastewater treatment. We've used the terminology advanced open brackets, tertiary closed brackets, wastewater treatment plant. My understanding is that there is indeed a difference, and I think we heard that today, that there are some advanced treatments that are not tertiary, that they have some benefits, and that tertiary treatment, we heard from the top, may have some benefits. We also heard very clearly from our public that although they like environmental benefits, they're also very cognizant of cost. And I believe that we should leave that question open at this time, whether we do it advanced or tertiary or some other form of advanced. I think we have to be very clear. McLaughlin is mentioned only in item 2B. I think it does have to be shown as an item under element number 1. So we basically say a centralized, advanced, tertiary or equivalent wastewater treatment plant at Rock Bay, BC Transport Canada sites as we might want to say a potential wastewater treatment site, so that we're maybe not showing too much preference. Item C as it's shown, item D as it's shown, and then item E would be basically saying consideration of an advanced tertiary or equivalent wastewater treatment plant at either McLaughlin Point or at Clover Point as an alternative, or as a possible alternative to the Rock Bay BC hydro site. So we would be very clear, we are still going to look at that. I think the only other detail that I would add is that I think as we, and I absolutely agree with that we should be moving forward on finalizing the costs of the Rock Bay site, and who knows, the fact that we've got another option on the table may give us a better price, but because we'll be negotiating for that. But I think clearly our staff is going to be working on the costs of Rock Bay. I think at the same time we're doing that, and that'll take a while, I think we should revisit the issue that Director Atwell was referring to the other day about what are the costs of McLaughlin now. We had a firm bid, but that firm bid expired a few weeks ago, and we're now in the situation where we're going back to the bidder. I think we have a letter from them. They're still interested, but I think we should go back and talk to them. Now, if you like, Madam Chair, I can make suggest amendments as I've discussed.
Sure, I wrote them down your first time around, but so you propose to add an item E to number 1?
Yes. So it would, in addition to the ones we have, it would say basically adding McLaughlin or Clover as a possible alternative.
Are you happy with McLaughlin and Clover?
Point of order, we had a discussion the other day about adding McLaughlin. What came forward was a 3-site option, not a single site McLaughlin.
Thank you. Director Young, it would be crisp and in keeping with our motion from the other day if you would propose that we move what is 2B up to 1E.
2B, a tertiary,
the
at
wording,
either McLaughlin or Macaulay Points, a tertiary. Well, I don't believe that that it is necessarily we're necessarily going to get all of those things. We may get some of them. So I'm sorry, I hadn't a wastewater plant at either McLaughlin or Macaulay. If you want to say a possible tertiary wastewater plant at Oak Bay and provision for the West Side plant. But we can't commit to Clover Point as a component of a system at this point.
Sure. So I think Director Desjardins' point of order was in order because we have to make motions that reflect the motions that have been made. The wording in 2B, you can add possible if you wish, but it would be in keeping what this committee decided on Wednesday to make 2B, to add it as 1E, and you can add possible wherever you like.
Okay, in that case, I will add possible under tertiary, and then as the rest as it's worded.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. Seconded by Director.
But I think the words at either McLaughlin or Macaulay Points as an alternative.
As an alternative, do you mean to Rock Bay?
Yes.
Okay, so with the words as an alternative.
Again, what is happening is this is coming back as a centralized site as opposed to the motion that occurred the other day.
Director Desjardins, I think with the wording with Clover and the 10-liter plant on the west side, it's not. It substitutes McLaughlin or Macaulay and refers back to 1A. because all of 1B is proposed to become 1E, including McLaughlin or Macaulay, Clover, and a 10-liter.
Thank you for
You're
the
welcome.
clarity there.
I think it reflects the spirit of the discussion, Madam Chairman, and I am trying to
You're doing great.
I'm trying to build as big a tent as possible
I understand
here.
exactly what you're doing.
I think, if we're going to get support for this, I think we have to say we are prepared to look at these options.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So on the amendment, which is to add the word possible tertiary and alternative to Rock Bay after McLaughlin or Macaulay points, and all of the other language in B, and make that become 1E. That's the amendment we're debating right now. I have Director Blackwell and Director Director Plant who wish to speak. Director Blackwell, go ahead.
Thank you. I tend to agree with Director Young. I'm just concerned about the issue. I understand that the reason we have provision for modular 10 megaliter advanced, blah, 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 in Colwood is because that's what's in the approved wastewater treatment plant right now. And so I just want to make sure that after we look at all these other possibilities for the east side, that there's an ability to amend for the west side that makes it broader than simply, I don't want to eliminate what's in this 10 megaliter that Colwood had approved all by itself, but I do want to allow for the possibility of us to expand that for a bigger west side possible plant.
Okay, thank you. So you're going to keep the floor while I go to Ms. Hutchison, and she may have a suggestion.
I have a clarification. There is no west side plant in the current plan. All of the flows would go to McLaughlin. So under this proposal, likewise, Colwood flows would be treated at Rock Bay, in addition to the aspirations that Colwood has to have a high-level tertiary plant in order to have groundwater recharge and irrigation at the Colwood location. Because of the design of that plant, they need redundant capacity that would be available at Rock Bay. So
I get that, but okay. I think what the west side is trying to do is have a plant that allows us to have a plant that doesn't have to have 10 megaliters plus adding all those costs for Rock Bay or McLaughlin.
Okay. At the risk of getting to amendments, I might be able to help out Ms. Hutchison. Is there any harm in Director Blackwell proposing an amendment to the amendment to simply strike 10 megaliters and leave it open? Does that harm anything?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. You'd have to take out at the corner of Ocean Boulevard.
Sure. Okay.
Because we haven't decided in the west side where we want that plant to go.
Thank you. So let's go one at a time. We're on B turning into E. Can you make an amendment to the amendment? We'll get back to the Ocean Boulevard thing later to just strike 10 megaliter. That's your amendment to the amendment. Moved and seconded.
Maybe what we could just do is say or larger and strike the Ocean Boulevard because...
Sorry, to be very clear, I know this is really confusing. We're actually not talking about 1C right now. We're talking about 2B becoming 1E. So there is no Ocean Boulevard. We can go back and clean up the Ocean Boulevard language later.
Sorry, okay.
No problem. So we have a mover and a seconder to, for now, strike the reference to 10 megaliter. All those in favor of that amendment to the amendment? Any opposed? Thank you very much. We're now back to the main amendment, which is 2B becoming 1E in the ways that have been described so far. And the next speaker I have is Director Plant.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge Director Young's attempt to find a bigger tent. I mean that sincerely because I actually think that potentially you're going to give us all what we're asking for. My comment would be, I think that the motion is messy if we call it a 1E. I truly would suggest that we would build it into the 1A and change the wording, and that we would say, and perhaps this is the amendment, a centralized advanced tertiary wastewater treatment plant with capacity for 108 at Rock Bay, and then insert the rest of the B as we've moved up. I think if we send the message that we have two different, that it looks foolish. I think it should just be one statement, or, and so a centralized advanced or
Okay, thank you. So that's fair. We have an amendment to the amendment to move what was going to be E, add the word or, and add all of that language after Rock Bay in A.
Yep.
On the amendment to the amendment, you can speak to it and...
It's just...
oh, sorry, is there a seconder?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Seconded by Director Bryce.
So
thanks, we're doing well. Go ahead.
this is the teacher in me saying you don't start different paragraphs with different topics. You all put it in one, you put it all in one paragraph.
And surely we want to get an A on our essay today.
We're at borderline right now. So I would just suggest this is not meant to take away from what Director Young has suggested, and I appreciate it, nor is it to prevent people from having their cake and eat it too. We will look at both.
I understand exactly what you're trying to do. So we have an amendment to the amendment on the table. We had Director Isaac who wanted to speak to it, unless you're okay.
The only concern is Clover Point hasn't really been subjected to any rigorous technical analysis. It's basically a political decision was made based on an amendment on Wednesday, and now we're elevating that to being on par with an option that's undergone basically 6 to 8 months of engineering analysis and public input. And so I think that's kind of problematic, and it doesn't reflect, I think, informed decision making. So I think for that reason, I think the redeeming feature, it's an apples and apples, but I think if it was, I guess we don't have any more amendments to amendments left, I would like to see A read a Rock Bay option or McLaughlin Point. I think that's the real sort of technically rigorous lens. I know Director Plant wouldn't like that, but I think that's the real, the real decision point at some point we have to look at, or an option C that hasn't yet been analyzed by consultants or proposed by market actors.
Okay, great. And in the spirit of Director Young, I'm going to...
vote against this.
Okay, thank you. You're going to vote against it. I'm going to ask us all to think about how many people we can get into the same tent. On this, I have, on the amendment to the amendment, I have Directors Bryce, Brownoff, and then I'll go back to Plant. Director Bryce, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since ultimately when this gets passed, it's going to be referred, and when it gets referred, it's going to come back to us. So it will either express collectively what we want when it comes back, or we will rehash it there. I mean, I think all the discussion has been good, but I think that the report that comes back to us can lay it out logically, have the right things in the right categories, and make it flow. So I'm going to support the suggestion that Director Plant has made, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for this committee to talk about it many other times.
But not too many, we hope. Director Brownoff.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm getting a little confused about all these amendments, because we passed a motion that said ask for the examination of a feasibility of locating facilities at McLaughlin, Macaulay, Clover, and a possible site to the Western communities. It didn't have the mega leaders in. I would have preferred that if that motion was captured in this recommendation, we're trying to wordsmith, and we haven't even had the feasibility, high-level feasibility from our staff. I believe that there's an option that would see not just one centralized plant. But as we're trying to amend, it's getting more confusing, I think.
It absolutely is getting confusing, and we've been here for a long time. But my urging is that we come to some consensus, we have a vote as committee that's going to give our staff clear direction. I think that's really what we're aiming for. Yes, Director Brownoff.
Yeah, and I'll just say that some of that direction, I think, has to be looking at phasing and this motion we passed on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you very much. On the amendment to the amendment, which is, I'll just refresh for us before I go to the next speaker, to take what was 2B and has been amended a number of times and insert the word or after Rock Bay in number 1A and add all of that language to it. That's where we're at right now. And I have Director Plant on the floor. He doesn't need to go on the floor. May I call the question on the amendment to the amendment? Okay. Yes, Director Atwell.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. So this is being added to 1A?
With the word or in between.
Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? One opposed. Director Isaac is opposed. Okay. So we now have, I think the amendment, Mr. Reams, is the amendment taken care of through the amendment to the amendment?
No, you still have to vote on Director Young's initial amendment, which is to move what is in 2B with his suggested amendments to 1A after the word or.
Okay, thank you. As amended. Okay, thank you. May we vote on that? Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We're back to the main, one opposed? Nope. None opposed. Okay, we're back to the main motion.